You're listening to the Identity Sports Podcast, where we dive into the world of faith, sports, and inspiration with athletes from across the country. I'm your host, Zach Vogel. Hey listeners, today I want to tell you about an incredible company that's revolutionizing brain health and performance, CalmWaves. CalmWaves is dedicated to helping individuals achieve optimal brain health and enhance mental performance through innovative and proven methods. Whether you're an athlete aiming to boost your game, a professional seeking peak productivity, or simply someone who wants to maintain a sharp and healthy mind, CalmWaves has the solutions you need. Led by the expert Dr. Doug Cowan, CalmWaves offers personalized programs and cutting-edge technologies designed to unlock your brain's full potential. They provide comprehensive cognitive assessments and at-home treatment plans tailored to support your brain health. Plus, they can even set up brain health and performance centers right at your facility. CalmWaves specializes in brain technology solutions for issues like anxiety, ADHD, head trauma, and other central nervous system disorders. You can trust that you're receiving the best care and technology to support your specific needs. If you're interested in learning more, reach out to CalmWaves today. Visit their website at calmwaves.com or send Dallas an email at dallas@calmwaves.com. That's calmwaves.com, or email dallas@calmwaves.com. And don't miss their podcast episode with PGA mental performance coach Rick Sessinghaus, available on the CalmWaves podcast. Don't miss out on the opportunity to transform your brain health and performance with CalmWaves. Get in touch with them now and take the first step towards a brighter, sharper future. Hey guys, welcome to the Identity Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Vogel. In today's episode, we dive into the life of San Diego Padres minor league hitting coach, Jed Morris. Jed was the 2002 Big 12 Conference Baseball Player of the Year out of Nebraska and went on to be drafted by the Oakland Athletics in the 36th round of the 2002 MLB Draft. After playing in the minor leagues and in the independent league, Jed went into coaching, which led to his current position of being one of the hitting coaches in the San Diego Padres organization. Let's go ahead and dive in. So, Jed, thanks for joining us today.
Very great to be here, Zach. Thanks, man.
Before we kind of get into some of the real heavy stuff here, kind of walk us through a little bit of your journey. How did Jed Morris become Jed Morris?
Yeah, well, grew up in Texas mostly. Was born in Oregon, but only lived there a few years. And then most of my upbringing was out kind of in the woods in Lufkin, Texas. Had a great time up until high school. I moved over to Clear Lake High School in the Houston area. And that was a great experience as well. Just really kind of got into a little bit more of the city life, but the competition level of that, sports and everything there was super high. Played against a lot of good competition. And then I ended up playing junior college at Tyler Junior College in Texas as well. And while I was there, I got recruited by University of Nebraska. Dave Van Horn had come and seen me, and fortunately I had a good day type of thing. But that really worked out. I mean, that was an unbelievable experience going to University of Nebraska, playing there 2 years, and then signing with the Oakland A's organization. Played in their minor leagues for quite a while. There was a lot of ups and downs until finally ending my career playing wise with the Lancaster Barnstormers in Pennsylvania Independent League in the Atlantic League.
Okay, awesome. So that you play a couple years at the Cornhuskers, you get drafted by the Oakland A's. What was the dream like for you? Were you always as a kid like, man, I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player? When was kind of the time that you realized that could be a possibility for you?
Obviously, like coming out of junior college and going to University of Nebraska, it was like, that was a culture shock in itself. The competitive level, we were ranked nationally pretty high when I got there. I think it was number 7 to start the season. And they had a poster in the locker room of Stanford in a dog pile from the year before. And they did that because they said, remember how close we are. And so all the guys that had returned, their expectations were we're going to the College World Series. And I'm walking into this environment. And I had torn my Achilles the year before, the very first game of my sophomore year of junior college. So I'd already signed with Nebraska. I was kind of overcoming something where At Nebraska, we as a team we wore our pants up to our knees, so our socks were exposed, and it was a team thing. Just as same as like we shaved our faces, and it was very uniform. And that culture shock of like we're all in this together. We have super high expectations. That made me better instantly. I was wanting to be good for my team, and my left calf wasn't really the size that it should be. It was a little smaller because of the surgery, and my sock was falling down in the fall. And I was like, man, I want to do well. I really want to help the team, and I want to do well. So it was a little bit of a slow start for me, but once I got going, I really took off, and the confidence had kind of accelerated at that point. So when I got into the minor leagues, we made it to the College World Series. We won the Big 12, and then the next year, I was Big 12 Player of the Year. We made it to the College World Series again. So getting drafted at this point, I had decided like I really thought I was gonna, I had the potential to be a big leaguer. So signing was not a light decision. It was like, all right, this is going to be a career in baseball. And making that step, I was very confident walking into. They put me into Vancouver short season first. So I was around all the Moneyball draft guys, and it was a
Okay.
lot of fun. Nick Swisher was my first road roommate, and he's just very loud, outspoken guy, and I was very much the opposite. But we were both confident. Like they call him Big League Swish, and it was for a reason. Like he felt like he was going to do it, and I felt the same way. I felt like I was a team guy, and because of that, I was going to be able to help any team that I was on and do well. So I was a confident player. I did okay, and then I had like another minor surgery on my Achilles after that season, and but I was 100% going into spring training. Got to go to High A in Modesto, California, coming out of spring training that first time, and I was the catcher. I felt like I was kind of the lead guy for the most part, and got to play and played well. And I felt like I had a pretty good season put together, and came back the next spring training, and this is where reality starts to hit. I wasn't like a high draft pick necessarily. I was very confident, like I was a first rounder, but I was really in the 36th round. So in baseball, there's tons of politics. There's tons of things that some are for good reason, and some is just a tougher road for some guys. So for me, I found out that second year that some of the minor league managers actually have a pretty decent say on who's going to play and who's not, especially if you're not a prospect, then he's got some say on whether he's going to play you or not. So I was on like a AAA roster all spring training, and then I was bumped down to High A again right before we broke. And talking to my manager Von Hayes, he was like, I've got to see my other catcher all spring training, and I really like him, and he was doing a great job. And so I'll try to find you some at bats. And I was like, oh, my heart kind of sunk to the floor. And this is the first time, where I was told that I may not be good enough, like that I'm going to have some adversity this year. And my manager didn't even really see me play yet, but he's already got an opinion that he's got somebody better than I am. So that hit me in the face. That's my first pro experience where I was like, okay, this is kind of a shock. What am I going to do from here? And so that year, I think I was just kind of playing to try to stay in the lineup. I wasn't playing to like be completely free. Just like enjoy playing the way I did before with the same aggression and all that kind of stuff. I was just kind of like a little bit more on eggshells where I was kind of like, all right, I gotta hit well enough to stay in the lineup. I remember even asking the hitting coordinator at the time, Greg Sparks, calling Sparky. I was like, like, what do I got to do to stay in the lineup? I had a good year last year. Like, I want to make sure that. And he was like, just keep hitting 300. And I was like, well, that seems like not the best advice.
It'd be
It's
nice
not
if it
that
was that
it's not that
easy.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So taking that advice in, I was like, okay, this is even more daunting than I thought. Like now, I really just have to like continue to hit in order to play, and that kind of mindset really plays with you. And you have to start. I had to start searching. I was reading the Bible on the buses more, and praying, trying to find my center. Like I didn't want to like necessarily have to live with that external, have to have results in order to feel good about where I'm at. So it was a battle that whole year, and I was not happy with my manager. I was very quiet about it, but he could tell. I probably gave him dirty looks here and there, and just felt like I was getting. I was just. It was a tough situation, and it wasn't on accident. I know God eventually I learned later that, this is something that I definitely needed to kind of have that knife cut through me and help me find who I really was. Felt like that was a big shift in my life in general,
Hmm.
to kind of see things differently. And I had the most fun that I had ever had. And I was like, this is how it's supposed to be, like you can sit there and be stressed out about your career and think about what needs to happen for you to move up or do
Yeah.
whatever. And it finally that switch, and, God helped me kind of check that, like, what is my strength, and, how can he be with me, and all of these things. And I felt like, that year before was such a hard time, that it allowed for me to have to break free. I had no other choice. I felt like I could either sit there and be bitter and my career's over, or I can
Hmm.
enjoy myself and just try to get better at baseball. So that was a huge deal. And it kind of catapulted me into then the next year where I got to move up to Double A. I was still kind of a backup catcher, and I was back with Von Hayes, so it was like, oh no, like what's going to happen here? But he saw a totally different side of me that he didn't really get to see that year, because I definitely looked like a different player,
Yeah. Well,
mentally.
you mentioned the whole playing free aspect for someone, listening that might not understand what you mean by playing free. Kind of elaborate on what that meant, at least to you.
Yeah, so this ties into to a book I'm super excited about, because I'm working on a book the last few months here with a seasoned high performance coach and therapist, Shami Benjamin. Right now, our title we're believing will be the holistic hitter, and we're looking at different ways that, a lot of people, a lot of mental coaches talk about being free and using your breath and being in the present, and all that stuff is really good. We're going to take a deeper dive into a lot of that stuff and really look at kind of where people start to go wrong, and like how they can auto correct themselves instead of going all the way into the bad and having that kind of elongate into a long period of time. How can they catch themselves and come back to having that kind of freedom?
Hmm.
And really, it came down to it, and I'm seeing it in such a good light now, that for me it was like I'm going into this season with like a process. I'm gonna get better at baseball. The results and the decision of the manager and the situation, no matter what level I was on, I was just like, all of that is stuff beyond my control. And what I can control is to show up, have a good attitude, and get better at baseball. And that, trusting in that, was where the freedom came. Like, it's easy to come up with a process, but not really trust it because you need to see the results.
Yeah.
So it was honestly moving away from the result base of, and I know this is way easier said than done. So that's why we're trying to dissect it in the book and
Hmm.
really talk about what that means to let go of those results and a lot of it that you don't have control over, and be process oriented and really focus on trusting that, to the point of like there's so much freedom in that. And in our Christian life, when we're trying to find our identity and we're allowing other people and the results of like, do you have a transactional relationship with God? Like at that point I could have said, God, if you really want me to have a career in baseball, then you're gonna make things happen, and I'm gonna like have
I'm gonna go
good
four for
results on the
four with
field.
4 home
Yeah,
runs.
exactly. Like, God, if you want this to happen, like,
Yep.
you're gonna like pave the way for me, and it's gonna happen. And instead of that mindset, I'm gonna be like, God, whatever you give me, I'm gonna do the best with. And so that is also true in our life. So he gives us a process of like, read your Bible and pray. And if you don't trust in that to be enough to like have a relationship with him, then you start to look at circumstances in life to be the reason why you're going to have a relationship with him. And I think that's where
Mm.
the gold that we're finding for this book is like, they're always in the back of your mind. You want to say like, well, I think God wants me to have a life where I'm rich, that I have plenty, and I'm in a worldly sense, that I have like things are going easy, like there's something that's going to work out because it's in his glory. All of that can be true, but if you can, there's two ways to look at it. It's like
Mhm.
he could want you to have all those blessings and all of those things, but he also wants your mindset to be that you're just going to read your Bible and you're going to pray and you're going to stay humble
Yeah.
and you're going to trust in him. And
Yeah.
that is enough. It's not like you need then the validation and all of the different things that can be a slippery slope into now you have control, and that you are responding to the world instead of responding to what he wants you to respond to. So that is where the gold, and I'm so excited about the book itself because we're going to help some people. And that's our heart.
Yeah.
Shami and I both have a heart to help people, and we really like what we're finding so far. And stuff that even I'm learning as I go, but stuff that I've experienced as a player, but I feel like people who are maybe they're young players or they're coaches of young players, they're going to start to look at how they establish values for their team or what is important, and they're going to be able to look at and see how maybe players are going wrong and how they can head that off before it gets to a
Yeah.
bad culture or a bad situation where we have a bunch of selfish players that all need results. And if there's no results, then it's just a crash and burn. That situation, which is very prevalent in it's not easy to talk about process, all the high competitive level, and players need their careers to continue, so on and so forth. The money involved, all of these things matter, but it's the mindset
Yeah.
that you have going into it, and we're just
Yeah.
excited to dive into that.
Yeah, that's so good. It's almost like the harder and the more control you try and have with it, the quicker you'll lose it. But when you have it almost like an open hand of, okay, God, you've given me these talents. How can I use them for your glory? It just unlocks what you were talking about, that freedom where you realize God doesn't love you anymore if you go 4 for 4, 0 for 4. I mean, sometimes as athletes, we try and think of, okay, I need to read my Bible right before the game because that's going to affect how I play in the game. If I'm right with God or if I said enough prayer before. And that's, really just not how it works. And that's the cool thing about
Mm-hmm.
that freedom is, even what you touched on earlier is sometimes as Christians we expect our life to be easy or, oh, because I'm a Christian athlete, I'm going to be a better athlete. I'm going to go 4 for 4. I'm going to get more opportunities than the guy next to me who is out at the bar till 3 a.m. in the morning. And that's not the reality. But what God does promise is He'll give us a peace beyond understanding. And so we have a peace in the process where we can go out there and we can play in that true freedom because it really doesn't matter at the end of the day if we go 4 for 4, 0 for 4. We're using the platform that God has given us. And through that, you could even argue, and maybe you'll touch on it in your book, is that maybe in a way you almost become a better athlete because you're playing free. Instead of going up there and being so tight, it's physically proven that if you can play loose and getting in that right frame of mind, you can be a better athlete and you can be better at anything you do in your life if you have that peace and you're not so stressed and worried about the outcome all the time. And so having that perspective throughout your years of minor league where you kind of had a frustrating year, you kind of had a flip side year where you really focused on the process and being a team player. How do you feel like that's helped you now in your role as, a minor league coach with the Padres?
Oh, it's immense, and that's why I say, like, I feel like, you know God had those things happen for a reason. He cared about my heart and cared about my perspective, and so he knew that I just thought I was going to chug along and be a big leaguer, and I needed to see a bigger picture. you know, it ended up being where I didn't become a big leaguer, but the bigger picture that I've been able to receive from that situation and all the hardships and stuff, it's irreplaceable in my life. Like, it helps in every way. Obviously, it helps me as a coach. I see things that the players are missing a little bit. I kind of describe it. There's a really good kind of way to look at it where if you put a frog in lukewarm water and you heat it up to boiling, the frog won't recognize the temperature differences and then it'll end up dying in the boiling water. Whereas, like, if you put a frog into boiling water, he'll jump out immediately and save his life. I feel like what happens is with a lot of players is that they are in that lukewarm water and they end up getting into boiling water and kind of dying in a sense, and they don't realize it. It's happens. You want those results so bad, and you want your career to go a certain way. My perspective now is like, guys, you got to be able to see some of these things that are dragging you down. You absolutely
Yeah, it's
100% can
good.
become a better player by getting rid of some of the baggage that you think is important. So what you said there about playing better as well is absolutely true. The thing though you said too is very important. You don't just read your Bible right before the game so you get a hit, because that is result based, and that is looking at it completely wrong. So
Hmm.
it's about truly releasing some of that baggage about whether you're going to get a hit and whether you're going to get a result that you want, and like truly trusting in where God has you at that moment. So being present is all very important. And so when I'm watching my players, I can tell who's not in the present, who gets stressed out easily by, getting out, striking out, whatever. I can see guys who are tinkering a lot because they don't believe in themselves, because they feel like they're not doing good enough. They may try to even move away from something that they're doing really well, and I'm able to like say, "Hey, no, I can see the bigger picture here. You're doing this
Yeah.
really well. Let's not jump off of that because you didn't get a hit yesterday." You know, I want to make sure that they understand that there's like this certain piece that you talk about, and they're going to see that in me, and I'm going to be able to have that duration. I'm going to be able to stick it out. I'm not going to care about, instant results. They're going to be able to sense that, and they're going to be able to relax. I'm going to try to give them as much as I have on
Hmm.
that regard, so they're not flying off the handle. They're not like trying to switch things up. They're not, I say, and I'm going to kind of call it like burning your house down. I heard a really good thing one time. I was coaching at a smaller level, Eastern University, and my office was like right outside the locker room. And so I heard the soccer coach tell them before their very first game of the season, let that fire, that passion that you have right now for that first game, let it warm your house, but don't let it burn your house down. Let's not get overexcited. Let's stay within ourselves. So I can tell the guys that are, okay, maybe you're getting complacent too, or like you did really well yesterday, so you're just going to like dog it today. Like that's my mindset is not going to allow for that, because I see the fragility of all of that stuff. I want to make sure that they're caught and brought back
Yeah.
to that trusting in the process of how they did good yesterday. I want them to, stay in that for today as well.
Yeah, that's so good, and that's so true with literally everything. I mean, I think of the song from Casting Crowns as "Slow Fade." You know, it's when we don't have a buddy or someone out there that's kind of watching our back, we just start saying, "Okay, I'm gonna do this, and it's gonna be okay because it's just a little bit." And then all of a sudden all of a sudden you look back at it and you see, "Oh man, how did I get here?" So it's
Mm-hmm.
so cool to kind of to hear that from a biblical perspective, but then to hear your perspective as just a minor league baseball coach, but you kind of have that same almost view of these athletes in front of you that have all the talent in the world, and you can see the choices they make and the things, and you can kind of help guide them because you ultimately see the big picture. And it's just like God in your life where when you were going through those days in the minor leagues, you may have thought, it's going to be a straight shot for me to the big leagues or all these things, or maybe there are things in your swing or maybe in your life where maybe you started to get off path and, God ultimately knew the whole story and he knew the big picture and was there. And by diving in his word every day and by seeking him, you truly kind of find that understanding and that direction in life. As you kind of have been mentioning on some faith aspects, if there was someone watching today that really aspired to be a major league baseball player, through your experiences, is there a verse or some kind of story in the Bible or something that you would find is so relevant to the athlete's life? How could you encourage them through that today?
Yes, I absolutely. That was another thing that happened during that tough season was I really grabbed onto a verse, and it's been my verse ever since. It's my life verse, I guess you could say. But it works in so many good ways for me that I'm able to let go of things and trust God. So Proverbs 3:5-6, it is a verse that I can go slowly, repeat often, and it allows me to find, another good way to look at it is like with that chart and talking about like kind of slipping over to kind of a negative side or whatever. I feel like sin in our life and all these things are kind of like gravity. They're always kind of pulling us that direction. That's just kind of our nature. And so this verse allows me to kind of let go of things and become lighter. So what I do in this verse is, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. So I I actually, when I do that verse, I read it, say it in my head often. Sometimes it's a lot. I'll pause on the word all. And so I'll go trust in the Lord with all. When I do that, I want to sit there on the word all as kind of a meditation and really let whatever pops into my mind, just let it out and say, I need Jesus to take this thing, whatever it is, for whatever reason it's on my mind, it must be important. And sometimes when I do that, I'll kind of allow things to kind of I'll just find something that I didn't even know was making me stressed out. And when I let go of it, my eyes like shoot open and I feel this energy that I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that I let go of that, because it's a daily process to let go of things. That gravity is constantly pulling us. And this verse is my way to fight back, to become lighter, to become free. And I feel like if I don't say it for a while, there's things that get stuck. Like we all get stuck on something that we don't know we made into a result based thing or whatever. When I let go of those things before coming onto the podcast today, it's like I'm going to trust all of this podcast to God. Like I'm going to let go and I'm going to be able to be relaxed. And you can see how repeating the scripture before you do anything would allow God to kind of take control of the situation and show you what's supposed to happen instead of whatever you think is supposed to happen.
Wow. There there's so much truth in that. That's so encouraging. I mean, I can think of all the times in my life, and I'm probably going to steal that a couple times of just to be able to focus that because, even the Bible says in prayer, God ultimately knows what we need and he even knows what we're going to ask before we even ask for it. And so just pausing on that word all and letting the spirit kind of reveal things in your heart is very cool. Thank you for sharing that. As you kind of talk through, so you've kind of seen life at both ends. I mean, you see kind of some of the pinnacle of sport, and you've seen kind of even mentioning coaching in college and college as well. Is there a difference that you see between the levels or the players, or something you want to elaborate about doing something at a high level versus maybe at the beginning stages of that?
I think certain players, even at a young age, kind of find their foundation and they find these like little things that they can cling on to. Baseball itself can be a very traumatic sport because there's a lot of downtime and then the highs are like so high. And if you have a coach that like is getting onto you or screaming at you at a time where you're kind of caught off guard and you thought you were doing well, and then and baseball will just like let you know whether you're doing well or not, or it'll just be very abrupt. So I think there's so many like mental things that happen at every level, but it's the guys that you can tell have just kind of latched on to the right thing. It almost doesn't matter what level you're at. You can see it even in some high school players where they have some sort of good person in their ear, or it's a good family member, or maybe it's just a good coach who can allow them to trust themselves. But really, when you watch a game at any level, you can start to see who's kind of trusting themselves and who is not going to kind of go off the rails if they do something wrong, because baseball can be very embarrassing. There's a lot of embarrassing things that happen at every level. You look at the major leagues, there's errors, and you're never, ever going to be perfect. And that striving for perfection from some coaches and some things can be very traumatic for players. So sometimes what I'm dealing with on a higher level is still that coach in the back of their mind from like high school or a
Mm.
lower level. And then sometimes if a player has gotten away from a good coach's advice and has kind of made their own thing and made it traumatic, then I can point back to what they used to do to be a calm baseball player and where they weren't so focused on the big leagues or whatever, because it's not right in their face as a high school player. It's like, well, I mean, I know the world of getting recruited and going to college is a big deal. So that's in their face, but there's just like you can have this calm about your situation, not at any level, but sometimes you have to, like, I had a player who thought he got drafted out of high school. He was very much doing more than he should. Like he was trying to swing harder. He was trying to hit home runs because he felt like that's the only way he could become a big leaguer. And I was like, well, what did you do in high school? He's like, oh, I was pretty relaxed. I just tried to hit a big gap and run. And I'm like, well, that's all you do here. Like, you're not going to all of a sudden be different.
Hmm.
And so it's really, you know, some players can be themselves early on, but then it's just that taste of like, well, I got to do something different to
Yep.
be at the level that I think it's so hard to make it to the major leagues. And when people change when they don't need to or shouldn't have, that's what hurts me the most. I'm like, I get so upset and sad that this player, if he would have stayed on the path and just continued to get a little bit better, I feel like he could have played in the big leagues, where it's like he totally derailed himself because he felt like he needed to jump there immediately.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. At every level, you can probably see all of that stuff, and it's tough. Baseball and hitting in general is just a very difficult thing to keep tabs on when it comes to yourself. Like it's external stuff can really mess you up.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time and joining us today, Jed. There's a lot of great knowledge that we're able to pass and learn from guys like you, especially on the faith side, and those that do sport a little bit differently, the aspect of competing biblically. And I'm sure you would probably attest to it. It almost kind of feels like there's a little bit of a culture shift in the way sports are done and sports are taught. As probably growing up, you probably didn't have coaches, or maybe you were lucky and did, that were focused on the holistic approach to sport, especially in something that's so results based. And the public, you live and die by what your stats were the day before, or like what you got to try and top it the next night. So give us a little update on what's going in your life currently, what you got upcoming this year, and how we can kind of stay connected, or maybe even a ministry that you founded or something that we can connect to and maybe help volunteer with, Jed.
Yeah, currently I'm headed to Fort Wayne, or I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana, for the high A season for the Padres, and I'm excited to be there. It's my first time coaching there for a long time. So on a personal level, Run Home Camp, you can look it up at runhomecamp.org, is something that's very near and dear to me. I finally made a switch as a college coach as well to take time to do something else, and I went and volunteered for this camp for some foster kids and some boys who really needed it, and it really also helped my perspective on what's important, and just seeing the need for these kids who don't necessarily get a that a boy and an encouragement, and don't even get the opportunity to play an organized sport because of their situation, bouncing around from group home or whatever it may be. I have now a heart for that, and Run Home Camp is a young nonprofit that is trying to spread around the country, even the world, potentially. And we have a few different places now where it's happening. In Pennsylvania is where it started, but we have one in Arizona, there's one in Oklahoma, and there's like 3 or 4 on the back burner that are ready to go. But it's intentionally kept small. It really takes care of these foster kids, like about 20 to 24 in each camp, and really just goes all out, gives them the all-star treatment, and celebrates their birthday, gives them an opportunity to like just play baseball without any sort of pressure and just have fun and do something they don't normally get to do. And it's been a huge blessing for myself, and I know the people that have come help as volunteers have been impacted greatly. So I would highly recommend for people to get on that ship as it's going. It's gonna be an awesome thing as it spreads.
Awesome. Yeah, and Run Home Camp, I got the opportunity to be a part of this last one here in Arizona with Jed, and definitely encourage you to check it out. It's something that is quite incredible. And you think that you're going to volunteer and help these kids out so much, but then you walk away with it being impacted so much of just the interactions and the friendships you build with these kids, and just being able to like what you said, just to love on them and give them encouragement. It's something that these kids haven't really ever had before. They may have not have had a stable father figure or even a stable home. They may have bounced around a few times. And so I definitely encourage you to check that out at Run Home Camps. We'll have more of the information too in the bio of this podcast, along with your upcoming book as well. We want to make sure we plug that, so go check that out on the release date and stuff. But other than that, thank you so much, Jed, for joining. That's really the whole purpose of what we're trying to do here with this podcast and Identity Sports, is to give so many great people like yourself involved in the world of sports a platform just to share the way you do things, the way that God has worked in your life and is working through your life. being able to encourage these kids, whether through the run home camps or even guys that come into the Padres organization. They think that they're just going to get better about baseball, but you're also teaching them how to be better people, better fathers, better husbands, and seeing the life change that way. So thank you for what you're doing. And we'll definitely be praying for you and your impact this year in Fort Wayne. So thanks again for being on here, Jed.
Thanks for having me, Zach. Great opportunity. I appreciate it.
You're listening to the Identity Sports Podcast, where we dive into the world of faith, sports, and inspiration with athletes from across the country. I'm your host, Zach Vogel.
You might not have already realized it, that this podcast is produced by a nonprofit, donor-supported Identity Sports. We're just a little nonprofit producing this podcast in the beautiful loft of a downtown thrift store. We aren't getting paid big bucks like a for-profit business. Nope. We're making this podcast not for money, but because everyone on our team believes in what we do. We give athletes a platform to share their faith and their inspirational stories. But that means that we rely on people like you. If you've been to one of our Tales from the Tour or Tales from the Dugout gatherings, or if you've watched or heard an inspirational story from an athlete who found their identity in Christ, or if this is the first time someone shared or you've come across our podcast, I have a request. I wonder if you'd take a quick minute to do something for us. Get into your browser and search for identitysports.com and find the donate page. It doesn't matter how much you commit, a few dollars or a few hundred. It just matters that you show us that you want us to keep telling these stories. My recommendation, pause this episode, do it real quick before you forget at identitysports.com.